So because we're making it a task, we don't need this listener right here. And so the way we're going to do this is, let me think about this right now. We're going to need a task which returns a list, which is of type parse query, or sorry, which is just a list of parse users. And then this is a task completion source. So then this is going to be friends task, and then it's just going to be task.create. Then what we're going to do is then we're going to return the friends task. Friend task does get task, and then we need to update this right here. It's a list of parse users. Okay, great. Now the great thing is all parse methods, they return tasks. So I could do this instead of doing find in background and then passing in that anonymous inner class. I can just do this, find in background, and then it's going to return me a task. So it's going to return me a task, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, when I found the stuff in the background that I'm interested in, I'm just going to fire up this continuation, and then I can just let's see here. So the continuation, what it does is the first generic type is the kind of object that you're receiving as input from the task that I just completed. And the second generic type is a task that you want to execute after this one finishes. So in this case, it should be void because in this case, yeah, it doesn't make too much sense to use this task structure, but whatever, we'll just do it for the sake of demonstration, or I just want to show you guys this. So when we fetch the friends, then what we're going to do is we're just going to do friends task dot set result, and in this case that's just going to be task dot get result. Okay, so that means we can get rid of this guy right here, and now that we have that, this becomes very, very simple. So remember, the first parameter in a continuation is the input, and then the second parameter is the task that should be fired when the current one completes. In this case, the task that should be fired is, let's see here, it's a task that returns a list of parse users. So then we're going to return a task that returns a list of parse users. So the way we do this now is we just do return parse Facebook utils dot fetch friends task dot get result, and there we go. And then once we've fetched all of the friends, then we can fire up another continuation. And so let's see here, what does this continuation do? It's not going to do anything else. That's all we really want to do, right? And so when, let's see here, let me try to format this correctly. And so then once we have the task, let's see here. Okay, I kind of messed up. The second parameter, we're not returning the second parameter, it's just, we're not actually wrapping it inside of the task generic type, we're just wrapping it inside of the type that should be. Okay, so I was correct before, it should be like that, but the method is not continue with, the method is continue with. This is a little confusing, it's continue with task, right? And so now if we do continue with task again, and now we put in the continuation, that almost worked. So let's see here. So that part works, and then the task that we're returning, it is let's see here. We're not actually going to be returning another task, right? Because that's the last task. So then we can do continue with. There we go. I think this should work now. There we go. Okay. And there we go. All right. So that works like that, and then we can just do if. We can just do say photo. I'll get results. Alright, so this will work. This will work, but there are instances in which it might fail. So the first problem you might notice is we're not doing any kind of error handling. If we go here, for example, inside of this parse Facebook utils class, you'll see that this task, it might have an error. It might go task.getError, but we're not actually worrying about that. We're just doing task.getResult, and that's not very good. We want to be able to handle errors, but we want to be able to handle them effectively. Now, before, what we were doing is we were doing this annoying kind of thing where we were checking to see if e is equal to null, and then we were doing e.printStackTrace, right? So we're going to do something kind of similar to that, but it's going to be a lot cleaner. So what we do is, first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if we actually have any errors in here. So if task.getError is equal to null, then we're going to just do friend task.setResult. Otherwise, we're going to do friend task .set_error, and then the exception we're going to pass in an exception that says, I don't know, couldn't fetch Facebook friends, right? So now we're going to do something similar here. In this case, what we want to do is we want to first make sure that the response is not, the JSON is not null. So if the JSON isn't null, then we'll go in here. Otherwise, we'll just do fetch friends task.setError, new exception, graph response is null. And then we want to make sure that the IDs are fine. So if the ID is not equal to null, and we want to make sure that we have at least one ID. So then if we do that, otherwise we'll spit out another error. Not enough IDs for friends. And there we go. So now we have two errors. Now how do we handle them? So what happens is continue with task, it's always called. But there's another method. It's called let me find it here. It's called onSuccessTask. So onSuccessTask is only called when the previous task had no errors, right? So if, for example, this fetch friends task, if it had no errors, then, and we put this onSuccessTask right here. So then onSuccessTask, and then we created a new continuation. In this case, let's see here. What are we want to continue with a list parse users. I'll explain what this does in just 1 second. So before, what we were doing is we were continuing with this task, right? Now the difference is we are only going to be returning, we're only going to be doing this thing right here. We're only going to be returning the next task if we didn't run into any kind of errors while fetching the Facebook friends or while fetching the Facebook IDs, right? So now this is great. That means we don't actually have to do any kind of error checking in here. Now that's what happens when we call onSuccessTask. When we call continue with or when we call continue with task, these guys are always called. So how is that possible? I mean, if we don't call this guy, then how can we call this continue with? Then how can we go inside here? How can we call this stuff in here? Well, it turns out that whenever you run into any kind of exception inside of a task, and then you have onSuccessTask following it, the onSuccessTask, it's not going to handle that exception per se. It's just going to pass that exception on, right? So it's just going to pass that exception on, and if it turns out that there's a continue with block or a continue with task, then those guys have to handle the exception or do whatever. So the bottom line here is when you put .onSuccessTask, you don't have to worry about any kind of error so long as you've kind of handled the error, so long as you've handled the error handling code correctly inside of your custom tasks. And you do have to worry about those errors when you use continue with, because those guys are always called regardless of whether you ran into an error or not. Okay, so what does that mean? So when we've done that now, we also want to make sure that we have an onSuccessTask when like this right here. So we want to make sure that we didn't run into, or we don't run into any kind of errors. And then let's see here. So then if we don't run into any errors, then we can just do this right here. We can do save photo. And so now that should be good. So now we might want to just return one more task. Let's see, do we need to handle any more? I think we're good. New continuation, void, and then see what we want to do is we want to be able to call this one more time. Hey, hold on, let's see here. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so why do we need this last continue with block right here? Well, we need it because if we run into any kind of error inside of these two methods, then we want to alert the user, right? So if we run into an error whilst while fetching the friends, then it's going to skip these two tasks and then it's just going to jump straight into this continue block. If we don't get an error in this one, but we do get an error, I don't know, while fetching the Facebook friends, then it's just going to jump straight in here. But we won't actually execute this one, for example. And so continue. This is a very, very, very clean way for handling errors. You don't actually have to handle errors every time you do this. You just handle errors at the very end or one time when you need to. So then in this case, for example, in this case, we might want to do like if task.getError is not equal to null, then we could do task.getError dot print stack trace, and that's it. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of this code right here. Notice it's a little more verbose, but it's a lot easier to read because it's a lot more linear in nature. And let's just test this out really quickly, make sure everything still works. And okay, I just got the push notification, which means everything is still working. So this video, I don't think we'll go into the progress dialogues just yet. This is kind of running into, this video is becoming a little too long. So I'll see you guys in the next one.